The Goethe-Institut, in collaboration with the Du Bois Centers, the Institute of African Studies, and the Department of Philosophy, University of Ghana, Legon, intend to highlight the philosophical and the historical scripts of Antom Wilhelm Amo, his importance as a benchmark in the history of Africa and Europe, and his relevance to the Afro-German community today in Ghana, as well as in Germany, and also in Austria and other countries in Europe, I think.
In the early 1970s, rites were performed at the grave of Antom Amo at San Sebastian. And according to air participants, it was over the ownership of Amo's origins. According to this informant, the chiefs of Akonu, AKONU, is very close to Axim, and Shama decided to offer prayers to invoke the help of the unseen. And Kofreku of Shama was the first to go through the African rites of formal prayers, commonly referred to as libation. Nana Freko completed his prayers. When Nana Ifemawachi Atibrukusu of Akonu began his prayers, the bottle fell out of his hand. The two chiefs then agreed that there may be a probable reason as to that seeming accident. Thus, they requested that where the bottle fell must be excavated. And it was excavated. And a cup was found, inscribed with the name of Amo. And therefore, they agreed. The chief of Shama, Nanako Freku, said in Infante, "My brother, there's no need to contest the origins of this man. It is now obvious to us all." One of the major questions that we need to ask ourselves is that Amo at that tender age, being taken out of Africa, how could he know so much about himself and come back to his origins at a certain point? That was the question that always pricks the mind. And then somebody said, Amo's mother was called Anoba. Anoba was married by a white man when Amo was very young and very handsome. Now the mother was very beautiful. And this white man, after the marriage, took Amo and the mother to Germany, to Europe. And that explains why Amo knew who he was and where he came from, because the mother taught him who he is or who he was at the time. I was rather surprised. It says the mother had two other sisters. One was called Eguba, the other one was called Aya. And that whole village is filled with people who are the descendants of Anoba's sisters. And that Anoba, when he was living, had one and only child, and that was Amo. Who was Amo? You may all agree with me that education is a product of culture, and culture is a product of education. Education is about survival. Education is about the social self-concept. It is a transmission of a knowledge to a people to serve as the basis for their survival within a given ecospace. And it's also a cultural tool to ensure a culture's survival. There is no neutral education. There's no neutral knowledge. All education have a purpose. They have an ideology inherent with them. Every piece of knowledge is the product of a culture. Knowledge cannot exist in a vacuum. It is carried within the crucible of culture. For a culture to survive, it must generate the knowledge and have control over the means for the transmission of that knowledge, as well as its nature and the content transmitted. I could go on, but this is just to let you become aware of the fact that Amo went to Europe as a little boy, virtually not knowing who he was, and got educated in Europe. What I'm trying to say here is that Amo became German by virtue of his education. He was no more an African. He was no more somebody from Axim. That is the truth. He was a white man in a black man's skin. Either we have a philosophy as Africans or we don't. But we're still grappling with the knowledge that we've had, the tools that we've had from Europe. And this is where Amo comes in. Because he was a philosopher. But what kind of philosopher was he? Was he a German philosopher or was he an African philosopher? You know, and in asking us these questions, we are also helping to unravel ourselves. In looking at in this symposium of Amo, I think that as we reflect on the man towards the future, in building the blacks in Germany, in building Africa, we need to look at Amo as somebody who stood across the two continents. And then it can be one or the other, or embrace both at the same time. Thank you very much.
You said Amo was no longer an African, he was a European. And I can subscribe to that. But Amo was a white man in a black man's skin. Isn't that a little bit
well, maybe it was a bit sweeping. It was just to provoke thoughts. But his education has alienated him from his people. And so in order for him you have to make a crossover. It happens to almost all of us. It's a phenomenon that has been ongoing for quite some time. So just saying it, maybe it was a very blunt way of putting it. But I was talking about the problem to do with alienation. And know that, I mean, the more Amo stayed, witnessed what was happening to black people in Germany and in Europe, obviously, he knew that he wasn't white and that he was different, and he would definitely bond with his own people. That is why the little bit that I know about his writing, he was always trying to express himself as a human being, And if you think about it, he was trying to prove that all human beings are equal. But racism would not allow that to happen, you know. So for me, that is the. I mean, if Kant, for example, who was taught by Amo, could make that kind of statement about. Okay. That's okay. But I mean, for him to have made, such a great philosopher in German terms, to have made such a stupid statement, it's sad to say.
Okay. Would we please dwell a little bit more about this mislearning? Please dwell a little bit on that.
That's a thesis. It's a culture that educates you, so that you may enhance that culture, right? So if another culture educates you, then it educates you to enhance that culture. If that culture has things that are different from your culture, then when you come into your culture, you then tend to have problems because you went through a cultural process which has changed your epistemic structures, you know? So it is making you into something that maybe you're not. Your roots are then cut off. It's like you have roots, but somewhere along the line, somebody grafts something onto that particular thing. So your identity has a problem about it. But most of us go through. See, Europe has always held itself as the universal, writing for mankind, and you don't blame them because that was the world they knew. If you take Hegel went on and wrote, and Europe was the end of it. It was a developed. So the others had to follow Europe. You understand me? But if you're probably taking time to study something else, right now, for example, probably the greatest study that I've been doing is about chieftaincy. And the more I learn about that particular institution and the meaning of its symbolisms, the more I see that within just a tiny symbol, a living symbol, it expresses so much about the world that probably if we had followed the teachings of that symbol, the world would be a much better place than it is right now. But then if you're educated away from it, you don't even understand what it is. Mm-hmm. So I think that Amo always encourages you that wherever you are, you should try to express yourself as a human being in whatever conditions you're in. Amo did not accept to be inferior. He did not accept he fought anything to do with his inferiority. Even maybe you could say that at a point he may have given up, but even at the point of giving up, it was also part of the fight. His return to Africa was part of the fight for his self-dignity of himself and his other people. Wherever you are, don't let anybody put you down. No human being is better than you, right? And always believe that you can do what you have to do. Marcus Garvey used to say the same thing, and so on and so forth. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Welcome.
Professor Brentjes, who is 80 years old now and suffered from a stroke, could not attend this symposium. But he was one of the first in the former German Democratic Republic in the GDR to research Antom Wilhelm Amo. And since he was already here at this university in the 1970s, he asked me when I visited him last week in Berlin, he asked me to deliver a few words to this audience. And so I read from his, what he told me to tell you. Berlin, 1st of October 2009. I'm extremely pleased that this great African who lived in Germany for almost 50 years is remembered today in Ghana. Antom Wilhelm Amo was not allowed to teach as a tenured professor at university, since neither the Catholic nor the Protestant Church wanted anything to do with Africans. But Amo is certainly the first African in Germany with a university education. He was the first proof of African excellence in academia in Germany. Unfortunately, his first dissertation, De Jure Maurorum in Europa, has never been published since the topic was then already of high relevance as it is today. Amo was enabled by his teachers to write about a subject which Europeans did not like to read about, namely the rights of Africans in Europe. Therefore, it is high time that this great son of Africa is remembered and honored. I'm even more happy that on the occasion of this symposium to honor Antom Wilhelm Amo, a copy of my Festschrift, commemorative publication on the Ghanaian philosopher, can be presented to the University of Ghana. I sincerely hope that the Ghanaian intelligentsia will provide its people the bright future they truly deserve. Professor Brentjes. And we have a copy for the library, one, in these days you would say probably old-fashioned in a book. And then, we have also the same copy as PDF files, which can, of course, be copied easier and can be presented to students. So this is the book Mrs. Silla wants to.
Yeah, I would like to present this book, which you already have in a copy here, but as I understand, it's very much treasured in the Bonn Library. So as Professor Jeje was asking the students to study more about Amo, I think if you have a copy, which is take a hard copy from a digital copy, which we put together, so the students really can have easily access to some works of him. This is the book from Burkhard Prentice, which he compiled out of documents, receipts, and what he could find about Amo.
And let me take this opportunity to say thank you for this generous donation.
The state of Amo's grave is not very nice. As we know, our symposium is titled The Long Forgotten Philosopher. The people who live around his grave at Chama Castle don't know who was this man. So what can be done? What can we do?
I can assure you that we will take this matter up almost immediately and see how we can rehabilitate his grave within this Nkrumah centenary celebration, which goes up to next year. We will revisit that issue.
Because it is a great landmark for Ghana and for Germany as well.
Yes, well, I would even go beyond that. It's not so much as rehabilitating the gravestone or the grave. We will do that. But how do we relocate him in the educational program of Ghana? We must have books that tell the story of Amo, which our children must read.
Antom Wilhelm Amo, I think, can be regarded as the first Ghanaian philosopher. Even though his philosophy is based on European culture and European intellectualism, his mind is African mind, so to speak. So we can claim him as an African philosopher and the first Ghanaian philosopher as such. I have read some of his works, and I see that his philosophical insights are profound. But it's very unfortunate that Amo has become a forgotten Ghanaian philosopher. A forgotten Ghanaian philosopher.
Why was he forgotten? Well, of course, he lived in a period when many of us are not conscious of some of the things we needed to be doing, in terms of sharing knowledge and so forth with other people. But anytime I read about him or hear about him, I'm impressed by how he emerged. I think many people have that kind of story to tell, where certain opportunities open up for you that you never thought of. And through those, you suddenly find yourself doing things that you may not even have done in your own environment because the challenges were not there. And going abroad always brings a challenge, because how do I explain my culture to other people who do not have the same background? How do I get them excited about what excites me and so forth, So it's always a challenge, to anybody who has been really sort of looking at himself and his culture, with the purpose of understanding it more than, right.
What this symposium can do is to inspire, mainly inspire people to see the need for them to research into Amo and so on. Inspiration. When you come to such meetings, before you came, you didn't know. There are so many things you didn't know, but you come to know. But what you know actually is sort of very little, and you are encouraged, inspired to move on, to do more work.
Some people think that knowledge is somewhere, and that you go and get knowledge from some people, but you don't think about knowledge around you. And really, just having the perception and certain consciousness of things around you enable you also, to see something. And I think that for my students, what I want them to do it's really to be to inquire, to have the curiosity, and the energy to pursue the curiosity.
Amo is a part of German history, and particularly, in my opinion, and from what I have heard and read, he is the hero for Black Germans. He is a figure from German history who achieved in the intellectual sphere, for which Germany takes pride, rightly. And so, because many Afro-Germans, many Black Germans don't have a direct connection to the African part of their heritage, Black Germans look to Amo, I think, as the representation of Black history in Germany.
My name is Wiedenroth Coulibaly. I'm a Black German, Afro-German who created the Black German movement, and at the time being I live in Abidjan. I am very grateful for your contribution. It gave me some ideas, like what was going on here might have been going on in Ghana. I was always questioning and wondering. I think we are all speculating, because there's nothing big written about. But it's good to speculate openly and exchange all these ideas. So I'm really, really grateful. And I do have some insights about how come he did know more about his origin, knowing where he might have to go back. Now to comment. Sorry, I have to use this place. Yeah, same story. Being educated in a place does not make you turn you white, black, or whatsoever. I think this is part of all our education also, to stick to these colors and to use these colors as labels. I do agree that with his education he became German, and that he, as a German, still always was black, and for that reason he did have experiences which white Germans would never have, and then he would have to look like where has he counterparts and where can he communicate, what kind of experiences he really has as a now black German. He might not have used the word, but this is what we can define later on now from our perspective. So yes, I agree, he must have become something like a German or pure German, with never leaving aside that he was black, because the other ones wouldn't have let him forget about that, never. So this leads me to my second point about identity. Identity is a two-sided thing. You do not have an identity of your own and for yourself. If society does not respond to what you want to be and what you want to give and how you want to be, then you do have to change either the society or change yourself. And the society also has to change. The more people create all these cracks of thinking and cracks of definition, the more society changes. So in that way, I see Amo really as diaspora. He was one of the people who did have a diaspora identity, which no one else might have shared at that time. And he had to get along with that on his own, but we can learn from it, and we can learn that we should try and live together. Thank you. Antom Wilhelm Amo, dieses Gedicht ist für dich und die vielen, die oft alleine kämpfen und unbemerkt sterben, die selten gefeiert werden und doch unvergesslich bleiben. So I would translate. This is a poem for you especially, and for all those many people who fought on their own many times, not even being remarked by anyone, and who also died alone, who have been celebrated very seldom, but yet they will never be forgotten. So I think this is very appropriate also for our friend, ancestor, Amo.
We are very happy for this contribution. You have now let us know that Mr. Amo
He's a hero.
Was in fact a hero. He was liked by Germans because he was a first Ghanaian philosopher who graduated in this thing. In fact, we feel proud of him. Yes, Ghanaians feel very, very proud of Amo. By coming to remind us of Amo, you have come to let us cast our mind back to what has happened to our man. So we are now in a funeral. So you have to pour libation.
Something must be done.
Let's do it.
When they lift up the coffin.